Southwest Flight 2847, on what had seemed a calm morning on the Phoenix runway, suddenly turned into an unwanted drama stage, with 147 unwilling spectators glued to their phone screens. The sharp voice of lead flight attendant Jessica crackled over the intercom. "Captain Morrison, you need to be in first class immediately!" Was enough to make the whole plane, from TikTok scrolling travelers to serious businessmen perusing financial reports, look up. Something was very wrong in first class, and it looked alarmingly obvious. In seat 2A, Marcus Williams sat calmly as though in his favorite sofa in some sitcom where he was the hero, not in a plane about to take off. 12 minutes had passed since Jessica, with a face as if she had uncovered an international crime lord masquerading as a passenger, demanded he show his real ticket. Then she boldly called him a fraud, while other passengers busied themselves pulling out phones to film, ready to produce a viral clip worth more than any reality TV drama. Marcus just sat there, occasionally glancing at the Patek Philippe on his wrist, a watch worth as much as many people's homes, enough to buy dozens of first-class tickets, and waiting. "Sir, you are delaying this whole flight." Jessica's voice began to tremble. "The captain is coming." Marcus gave a small smile, one that made Jessica's blood freeze as though she'd just taken a $800 ice smoothie. "I know," his phone buzzed. A message from the legal team, short but heavy. "Everything is ready, sir. Just give the signal." Stories we tell each other about strangers, real-life stories that can shatter every prejudice, are exactly what we are going to watch today. These touching stories remind us that behind stories about people of color often lie the most shocking truths. Lives that can change everything, and sometimes even the stock price of a corporation. Have you ever misjudged someone so completely that it destroys your world? Or at least your career? Captain Derek Morrison appeared, majestic like a storm cloud, gold stripes on his shoulders gleaming under the cabin lights, enough to make an Air Force pilot envious. 23 years of flying had taught him one truth: disruptive passengers must be dealt with immediately, decisively, and usually that ends with them being invited off the plane under a cold report. "Jessica, what's going on here?" His voice carried the authority of someone who could decide the fate of hundreds mid-air. "This man," Jessica pointed at Marcus, with a look as if Marcus had just slipped a rat into overhead luggage, "has been in first class for 20 minutes. He refuses to show valid identification. He is also very aggressive," Morrison observed Marcus. A suit expensive enough to fly itself, posture calm like a monument, arms folded as though in meditation. Nothing about him screamed threat. But Jessica's voice was shaking, and she had never lied to him before, at least not in a way that held up to scrutiny. "Sir, I am Captain Morrison. I understand there may be a misunderstanding about your seat assignment." Marcus didn't utter a word, just held up his boarding pass, looking more like a piece of art than a simple ticket. "Southwest Flight 2847, Seat 2A. Morrison inspected carefully. Everything seemed legitimate, down to the last detail. This seems correct," Morrison said slowly, as though weighing a national decision. "He's fake," Jessica whispered, but her voice carried across the cabin. "Captain, look at him. Look closely. Does he deserve first class?" That question, seemingly innocent but soaked in bias, caused Emma Morgan's live stream viewership to soar to 8,000. Comments exploded. "Did she just say that? This is crazy! Southwest is about to be sued out the roof. Guess their ticket prices are going down big time." Morrison felt the pressure from the 147 passengers watching him, as though he were in an examination whose results would be broadcast over social media. The businessman in 1C impatiently tapped his watch, no doubt worried about missing $1 million meeting. The couple in 2C whispered back and forth, wondering if they should switch to economy to avoid the drama. A teenage girl in 4A raised her phone, filming everything, ready to become an accidental reporter of this one-of-a-kind event. "Jessica, I need you to explain what you mean," Morrison asked carefully, his voice slightly less commanding than before. "You know what I mean!" Jessica's voice broke, as though this were the first time she had met someone different like him. "People like him don't usually fly first class." Probably bought from some scam website or used a buy-one-get-one economy ticket and sneaked up here. People like me? Marcus finally spoke, the first time since Morrison had entered. His voice low, calm, but carrying danger like a tiger about to pounce, only this tiger wore a suit and sat in first class. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about, Jessica snapped. I see hundreds of passengers every day. I know who belongs where. Probably, she has some internal bias scanner in her head. Emma's phone shook in her hand. Her live stream now had 15,000 viewers, like a small concert crowd. Someone had started Southwest Discrimination, a name already smelling like lawsuit money. Local news stations kept messaging her, ready to pounce on the hot story. Final boarding call in 10 minutes. The frayed, static voice over the intercom announced, as if urging toward a climactic moment. Sir, Morrison said, I will need further identification. Driver's license, credit card, something to verify this ticket, or at least a country club membership card. Marcus leisurely reached into his coat. Morrison tensed. One never knows with disruptive passengers. But Marcus only pulled out a wallet. High-quality leather, made in Europe, looks more upscale than many handbags in 1B. Inside was a black American Express Centurion card, the kind Morrison only saw in luxury lifestyle magazines. The kind with a $10,000 annual fee just to hold, enough to buy dozens of first-class tickets. Morrison's confidence shook like it had hit a financial tsunami. This is a very exclusive card. Yes, Marcus replied simply, as if that were the most obvious fact in the world. But that doesn't explain how you got a first-class ticket, Jessica interjected, suspicion still baked into her voice like a detective. Those seats cost $800. You must have used miles or some upgrade trick or hacked the system. I paid full price, Marcus answered, adding a pricey detail. This morning at 6:43 a.m. Morrison felt a cold rush crawl down his spine. The detail was chilling, as though Marcus kept a personal ledger for every transaction. Most passengers couldn't even remember the hour they bought tickets, let alone the minute. 9 minutes until takeoff, Captain, Jessica urged, her voice like a fire alarm. Other passengers are complaining. They paid for comfort. This is making them uncomfortable. She was right. The businessman in 1C was now openly staring, perhaps deciding whether to demand Southwest refund him for an experience not as promised. The woman in 3D had pulled out her phone, clearly recording, likely for her own drama collection. Tension in the cabin felt touchable, as though even a bread knife could snap in two. Sir, Morrison said, his patience thinning, I will ask you to voluntarily leave the plane. We can resolve this at the gate with customer service. No. The word rang out through the cabin like a sharp blade slicing the silence. Morrison had heard that tone before, from passengers who eventually ended up in zip cuffs. Excuse me? I said no, Captain Morrison. I will not leave this aircraft. I will not move. I will stay in my seat until this plane lands in Phoenix. Jessica's face reddened, as though she had just run a marathon. Enough! I will call security. You are trespassing. 8 minutes until takeoff! The announcement. Jessica, do it, Morrison said. He had had enough. This passenger was clearly unbalanced, possibly dangerous, and defying his authority. Marcus looked at his watch again. That Patek Philippe was worth more than Morrison's entire annual salary, enough to buy a toy spaceship. Captain, before you do that, I have a question, Marcus said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. Are you familiar with Federal Aviation Regulation 91.11? Morrison paused. That was very specific. Very, very specific, like a clause in a life insurance contract. It concerns crew authority in flight operations, federal violations in interstate commerce. Sir, are you threatening legal action? I am asking whether you understand the legal framework you are operating under, Marcus replied peacefully, as if lecturing a first-year law student. Emma's live stream exploded past 30,000 viewers, enough to trend on every social platform. Comments flooded with anger. Is this 2024 and we're still doing this? Fire that racist crew now! I'm filming this for the news. Southwest is going to be more famous than Hollywood. 7 minutes until takeoff. Morrison's radio crackled like the opening chords of a horror movie. "Captain Morrison, this is ground security. We are coming aboard to remove a passenger per policy." "Understood," Morrison replied, but something in Marcus's expression made him hesitate. Marcus's eyes weren't those of a troublemaker, but of a strategist preparing the decisive move. "Captain," Marcus said gently, as though sharing a big secret, "I think you should know one thing before those officers arrive. This conversation is being recorded by at least 12 devices, enough to make an award-winning documentary. Your crew member has made some statements that may constitute discrimination under federal law, which means not only Southwest, but she is going to face a huge lawyer bill. And in about 30 seconds, you will receive a call that changes everything." Morrison felt his mouth dry, like he had swallowed the Sahara. "What kind of call?" Marcus smiled. Not angry, not smug, just knowing, as though he had just won a chess game his opponent did not see. "The kind of call that ends a career, Captain. The kind of call that becomes headline news, not entertainment gossip, but a financial section. The kind of call that changes companies forever, sometimes even removing the CEO." As if scripted by some dramatic god, Morrison's phone vibrated loudly. Caller ID read Southwest Operations Center urgent with a glaring red icon. Marcus leaned back in his seat, cool as if sipping a beach cocktail. "You might want to answer that call," he said, tone laced with mocking calm. Morrison's phone rang at his ear. "Captain Morrison, this is Southwest Operations. We are monitoring social media. Your flight has 42,000 live viewers, more than a football game. Handle this quietly and swiftly before it becomes the media crisis of the century." 42,000 people watching his every move, every drop of sweat on his forehead. Morrison wiped his sweat as two airport security officers, Janet Kim and Mike Rodriguez, both carrying zip ties, stepped aboard. They looked like bit-part actors in a B-movie action flick. "What's the situation?" Kim asked, eyes sweeping the cabin like searching for a terrorist. Jessica pointed at Marcus with a trembling finger. "This passenger has been causing trouble for 30 minutes. He threatened crew members and refused to move down to economy where he belongs," she said, her voice full of certainty, as if she held her own definition of where one belongs based on skin color. Marcus remained completely motionless, arms folded in his lap like a living statue. His only movement was his eyes, watching every person, every camera, every witness, making sure he missed no moment in this play. "Sir," Kim addressed Marcus, "we need you to come with us voluntarily." "I am in the seat assigned with a valid boarding pass," Marcus responded, his voice as serene as a meditation teacher. "I am not going anywhere." Rodriguez stepped closer, hand moving toward his zip ties like a Wild West gunfighter about to draw. "Sir, you are interfering with aircraft operations. Federal violation. Final warning! 6 minutes until takeoff," the gate agent announced over the intercom, sounding like a countdown before a major event. Emma's chat livestream exploded. "Crazy! Sue them all! Call all the news stations. Make this go viral so the world knows what Southwest did." The businessman in 1C finally lost patience. "Captain, I paid a premium fare to avoid exactly this kind of situation. I have a connecting flight in Phoenix, not to watch a reality show in the air." Other first-class passengers murmured agreement. The woman in 2D held her phone higher to ensure every angle was captured like a professional filmmaker. A teenage girl in 4A live-streamed to her TikTok followers, turning this into a live broadcast. "Sir," Kim said to Marcus, "this is your last chance to comply voluntarily before we have to escalate." Marcus looked at his expensive watch, a gesture now understood by everyone as defiance. "Officers, before you proceed, I have a question." "We are not here for your questions," Rodriguez snapped, patience gone. "Are you familiar with the legal consequences of false imprisonment?" Kim hesitated. That was lawyer language. Specific, technical, expensive sounding. "You are trespassing on property," Morrison interjected, trying to regain control. "Southwest Airlines has the absolute right to remove any passenger for any reason, even based on what they wear." "Actually," Marcus said, slowly pulling documents from his briefcase like a magician preparing the reveal, "let me clarify something about those rights." "Those rights," Rodriguez tensed, No sudden moves. "Hold your hand still. I am retrieving the documents you asked for," Marcus said calmly, voice soothing though the moment thundered. 5 minutes to take off." Morrison's radio crackled, as if signaling an impending disaster. "Captain Morrison, this is operations. CNN is calling our media line. Fox News wants a comment. We need this handled immediately. National news, Morrison, your career is on the front pages." Morrison felt his career disintegrating in that moment, like a sandcastle being swept away by a wave. But Jessica had never been wrong about disruptive passengers before. Never, or so she believed. "What documents?" Kim asked suspiciously. "The kind of documents that explain why forcing me off the plane will end all your careers and Southwest's too," Marcus replied, his voice neither fast nor slow but full of weight. Jessica's voice was nearly hysterical. "He's been threatening us all along. He refuses to show valid identification. Look at him. Does he look like someone who belongs in first class? He looks more like he's stepped off a high-fashion runway than a normal first-class cabin." Emma's view count had reached 55,000, more than the population of a small town. Major news outlets were messaging her constantly, ready to pay for exclusive interviews. Her phone buzzed nonstop with interview requests. The battery was close to giving out from the heat of the story. 4 minutes to take off. Morrison made his decision, like a general on a battlefield. "Officers, remove him." 147 passengers cannot be held hostage by one person's personal drama. Rodriguez stepped forward, zip ties ready like a cowboy about to rope a wild steer. "Sir, stand up slowly and put your hands behind your back, or we will apply procedure." Marcus did not move. Instead, he asked, "Captain Morrison, how long have you flown with Southwest?" 23 years, Morrison replied automatically, then realized and snapped to attention, realizing he had been led. "That's irrelevant. Officer Rodriguez, how long have you done airport security?" 8 years. "Why does it matter?" "Because in 30 seconds, you both will need to explain to your superiors why you just detained the wrong person, and that is not a story anyone wants to hear." Morrison's radio burst with static. "Captain Morrison, urgent. We have a developing situation. Await executive-level directives. Do not continue with passenger removal until further notice. This is a direct order from headquarters, non-negotiable. Executive level. That meant corporate headquarters. That meant people Morrison had never met, but who controlled his entire career, from whether he flew or whether he got free coffee in the pilot lounge. "Sir," Rodriguez said, his initial confidence gone, "you are under arrest for causing confusion. 3 minutes to take off." Marcus finally stood. The whole cabin held its breath, as though waiting for a magic trick. Every phone pointed at him, ready to record a historic moment. "Officers," he said gently, "in 20 years you will train new staff about this moment, about the importance of asking the right questions before acting, not just relying on feelings." He slowly reached into his briefcase. This time, no one tried to stop him, not even Jessica, who held her breath waiting. Marcus pulled out a leather folder, expensive, embossed with a logo that most people would not recognize, but definitely worth far more than ordinary tickets. He opened it carefully. "Before you arrest me," he said, "perhaps you should look at my identification." Kim hesitated, as though receiving a ticking bomb. Marcus handed her a business card. Kim read it. Her face went pale as paper. She passed it to Rodriguez, his eyes wide with shock, mouth open like he might swallow the whole plane. "What does it say?" Morrison asked, his voice trembling as if he were about to be sentenced. Kim's whisper was nearly inaudible, but it echoed through the cabin. "Marcus Williams, member of the Board of Directors, Southwest Airlines. Member of the Board of Directors. Not CEO, but a board member. High enough to ruin many careers, but not so high as to be implausible." Jessica's face contorted, as if she had just eaten a lemon. That can't be real. "A board member doesn't fly commercial. They have their own planes, their own helicopters, and their own team of baristas. 2 minutes to take off." Morrison's radio crackled with a different voice. Older, more authoritative, smelling of money and power. "Captain Morrison, this is Senior Vice President Davidson. We are aware of the situation aboard Flight 2847. Do not take any further action against the passenger in Seat 2A. The corporation will handle this directly. and you had better comply if you want to keep your position. Senior Vice President. Morrison had never spoken to someone that high up in the company hierarchy, someone he only saw in financial bulletins. Marcus sat back, smoothing his vest like a star just completing a peak performance. Captain Morrison, I believe you have some concerns about my credentials? Morrison felt his 23 years aloft evaporating before his eyes, his career deflating like a balloon. Sir, we, the flight crew, could not possibly know. How could we recognize a board member masquerading as an ordinary passenger? That is precisely the issue, Marcus said softly. You assumed. Your crew assumed. And now 60,000 people have witnessed those assumptions play out in real time. And of course, not for free. Emma's live stream truly had hit 60,000 viewers, a number any network would covet. The comments were a tangle of shock and vindication. Board member? Fire them all, they deserve it. Justice has been done and it's live streamed. This is the best thing I've ever seen. Someone make a movie about this. Screenshot everything. Historic moment. Rodriguez stepped back slowly, the zip ties forgotten like a toy no one wants. Kim stared at the business card as though it held a nuclear code capable of triggering a global crisis. Jessica began gasping for breath like a fish out of water. The weight of her words, recorded, live-streamed, witnessed by thousands, crashed on her like a boulder. 1 minute to take off, but no one was thinking about taking off anymore. The whole cabin was focused on the calm man in seat 2A who had just revealed himself as one of the most powerful people in the company and who had just rocked the aviation industry. Marcus checked his watch one last time. I believe, he said, we have some serious issues to discuss, and I hope you have enough time. The silence filled the cabin like a physical force, so intense you could hear a clock tick. Marcus Williams, board member, was seated in 2A while 60,000 people watched the crew's world fall apart live. Morrison stared at the business card trembling in Kim's hand. Member of the board. Those words did not fit together in his mind, like watching a sci-fi movie. A board member doesn't fly commercial. They have private aircraft, executive assistants, security teams, personal chefs, even. Sir, Morrison whispered, voice like a breeze. If you are a board member, why didn't you confirm your identity immediately? You could have spared us all this trouble. Marcus looked up, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but something deeper, a fatigue long built up. Captain, why should I have to prove who I am to sit in a seat I paid for? Or do I need to wear a sign that says I am Big Boss around my neck? That question struck like a hammer, leaving Morrison reeling. He realized he had never asked that of a white passenger. It was a bitter truth. We followed the procedure, sir. Procedure that says that black men in expensive suits are suspicious? Or is that procedure only for those who don't look like your idea of proper? That hung in the air, black. He had said it. The thing everyone thought but no one dared say, like an elephant in the room. Jessica's sobs grew louder. She now understood. This was not just a customer service error. This was a civil rights incident, recorded, live-streamed, permanent, and going to be a stain not easily erased. Emma's chat exploded. He said it! Exposing racism. This is history. Needs to go in textbooks. 90,000 viewers! Almost 100,000! Marcus reached for his tablet again, but this time his hand was no longer steady. The calm facade was cracking, like a wall struck hard. Officer Rodriguez, Marcus said, in your 8 years doing security, how many white passengers have you restrained for sitting quietly in first class? Or simply for doing nothing? Sir, that's not... How many? None. How many passengers of color? Rodriguez could not answer, his face draining. The math of bias is undeniable. Numbers speak. Marcus tapped his tablet. A new screen appeared. Not an organizational chart, but a video call. Live. The Southwest Airlines boardroom appeared with 6 executives staring into the camera, their faces more tense than the crew. Marcus, a woman's voice from the tablet said, we're watching the live stream. Are you okay? What's happening? The crew's faces went pale. This was not just any board member. This was someone the other executives called by their first name. Someone they worried about even more than falling stock prices. I'm fine, Patricia, Marcus answered. Though I think Captain Morrison and your crew have some explaining to do. A long story indeed. Morrison realized in horror that the entire Southwest Airlines executive team was witnessing this event in real time, like a group interview gone viral. "Captain Morrison," the woman on screen said, her voice authoritative, "this is Patricia Watkins, Senior Vice President of Operations. Do you want to explain why our chairman is being threatened with detention on his own airline and on a global live stream, no less? Chairman. Not just a board member, but chairman of the board." Morrison felt his knees weaken as if about to kneel. Jessica collapsed into a passenger seat, panting as if after a marathon. Rodriguez actually dropped the zip ties, plastic clattering on the cabin floor like coins spilling. "Ma'am," Morrison stammered, "we do not have identification. The crew reported that—" What exactly did the crew report? Another voice from the tablet. Older, more masculine, more authoritative. "This is CEO Jordan. I want an exact explanation of why our chairman was treated like a criminal when he was just reading documents." Emma's view count reached 100,000, more than the population of some small nations. Her phone was scalding. News alerts were continuously popping up on social media faster than she could read, as if a news race were underway. Marcus turned the tablet toward Jessica. "Ms. Martinez, do you want to explain to CEO Jordan what you meant when you said people like me? Or do you need more time to rehearse the script?" Jessica could not speak, could barely breathe. The pressure of having the entire executive team witness her discriminatory behavior in real time was crushing her, like a mountain. "Sir," Kim eventually found her voice, "we were responding to reports from the crew about a disruptive passenger." "Officer Kim," the CEO's voice cut through the cabin, sharp. "We have footage from many angles. Mr. Williams is sitting quietly reading documents, unmoving. What exactly disruptive behavior did he engage in? Is sitting quietly also disruptive?" The flight attendant said. "The flight attendant assumed," Marcus interrupted, his voice now sharp-edged like a blade. "She assumed I did not belong. She assumed my ticket was fake. She assumed I was aggressive. All those assumptions are based on one thing." He paused, letting the weight of that truth settle, like a stone. "My appearance." The cabin became dead silent, except for Jessica's ragged gasps, sounding like the hiss of a tire going flat. Marcus touched his tablet again. Another screen appeared. Southwest's internal communications. Real-time messages between executives. Legal department mobilizing. PR crisis team activated. Stockwatch initiated. The arrow is red, pointing downward. Discrimination. Potential litigation. Possibly billions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said to the cabin, "what you are witnessing is how assumptions quickly become lawsuits. How bias becomes headline news. How prejudice becomes a drop in stock value, maybe even a company collapse." Morrison's radio crackled, sounding like the echo of a world about to collapse. "Captain Morrison, this is Tower Control. We have 17 news vans at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and they are about to set up outside. The FAA is demanding an incident report. Complete departure immediately, and pray you are not stuck with this report forever." 17 news vans. This is no longer an airline incident. It is a national story, an expensive lesson. The voice of CEO Jordan from the tablet, cold as ice. "You will complete this flight. Mr. Williams will remain in his seat, the seat he paid for, with every right. Upon arrival, you will report directly to corporate headquarters, so be ready." "Yes, sir," Morrison responded, his voice robotic. "Ms. Martinez, you will make no further statements to passengers or crew. HR will meet you at the gate, and this is not a victory lap." Jessica nodded silently, tears streaming down her face like an unending river. "Officers," the CEO continued, "your departments will receive formal complaints. I suggest you contact your superiors immediately, and you'd better have your resignation drafts ready." Marcus ended the tablet connection. The executives were gone, but their presence lingered like smoke haunting a room. "Now," Marcus said, slowly rising, "let me show you something else." He opened his briefcase wide. Inside were legal documents stamped Class Action Complaint Aviation Discrimination, financial reports showing revenue impact from discrimination incidents, and training materials titled Unconscious Bias in Customer Service. He was preparing even more thoroughly than for a military campaign. Seat 2A was still cold. It was never made for judgment, but tonight it had become a witness stand in the sky. Marcus Williams leaned back slightly in his seat, pale yellow light from the overhead flickering over his shoulders like an unasked spotlight. He spoke, voice not loud, but every word struck like metal on glass. "I did not board this flight by chance, ladies and gentlemen." A wave of silence spread as though the cabin had been vacuumed of air. 47 discrimination complaints in just 1 quarter. This is no longer isolated. This is a pattern. And today's flight? He lifted his eyes, staring straight toward the cockpit as though piercing through its metal shell. Is a test. Jessica Martinez froze, her finger gripping the edge of her seat as if it were her last life raft. Morrison stood stiff, eyes following Marcus without blinking, as though he had somehow wandered into a play whose script he had never read. "Sir, you orchestrated this flight?" Morrison asked, the question stumbling from his mouth like a child caught, voice stuttering like buzzing mosquitoes. Marcus nodded slightly, blinking, voice calm as if reading a declaration rather than making an accusation. "I intended to fly first class on the airline I own." "Your crew intended discrimination." The confession dropped into the silence like an arrow striking the bullseye. Emma's hand trembled as her live stream suddenly surged past 110,000 live viewers. Comments poured in like water breaking a dam. "Throw in the bait and stream the fall." Black man, chairman, strategist. "Magnificent." Marcus quietly withdrew his phone, meanwhile bringing up a screen. A press release titled in full, "Southwest Airlines announces comprehensive anti-discrimination measures." His voice low, but his tone resolute. "This statement goes live in 30 minutes. It includes mandatory training, third-party oversight, and a $10 million fairness fund." He looked at Jessica, at all of them, his gaze deeper than reproach. "Your assumption about me just cost this airline $10 million. Congratulations, you are the reason for its largest investment this year." Jessica choked, like a motorcycle running out of fuel, her hands shaking, face melting under the heat. Someone pressed an oxygen mask into her hands. Marcus snapped his laptop shut with a soft yet final click, that clack echoing like the last clamp locking a trial sealed. Inside the cabin, silence stretched out like a heavy velvet curtain, covering 147 passengers who stared, refusing to blink, as though afraid to miss any motion from the man in 2A. The overhead light cast Marcus's face half in shadow, but his eyes, sharp as a scalpel, blazed through every layer of excuse, every furrowed brow, every apology yet to form. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, voice steady, not angry but heavy with demand, "sit down. We need to talk." Jessica staggered, as if the plane floor tilted beneath her, then collapsed into seat 2B. Her hand trembled, clutching at her staff badge, as though letting go would mean breaking. "Look at me," Marcus said, and this time his tone was a hammer on steel. Cold, loud, unignorable. Jessica lifted her eyes. Her own were red and glassy, blurred like steamed glass. What frightened her was not rage in his gaze, but something far worse, a silent disappointment so deep it needed no words. 8 years on this job, 15 trainings on discrimination, dozens of diversity workshops, Marcus whispered as if reading a charge sheet. "And in 30 minutes, you saw a black man in a $3,000 suit and decided he was an intruder, a threat." Jessica opened her mouth, but Marcus raised a hand. That gesture was not to silence her, but to let the weight settle, to force consideration before the final blow. "Do you know what Southwest's stock price was when we took off?" Marcus opened his phone. The screen glowed red in the dim cabin lights. 34.67 a share. Now it is 32.15. Down 7.3%. He tilted his head, as though wondering if she grasped the meaning of a number. And then softly, as wind sliding across the edge of a seat, $847 million lost just because of a mislook, a snap judgment, an assumption unspoken. From the back rows, murmurs began. Phones lifted like arms of justice, not to accuse, but to record evidence. "Captain Morrison," Marcus called without turning, his voice making the cockpit seem to shrink. Morrison emerged, face gray, steps heavy as if dragged by invisible weight. A man who had flown for 23 years now stood silent as a student awaiting failing marks. "How many passengers of color have you asked to leave first class?" "Sir, I don't keep those numbers." "I do." Marcus swiped on his screen. "In the past 2 years, you have ordered 17 first-class removals. 15 were people of color. 2 were white." The number did not explode like a bomb. It dropped quietly, like ink into clear water, spreading with inevitable stain. "You didn't see because you never asked. She told you a black man was disruptive, and you believed without question. She said someone didn't belong, and you agreed with no explanation. You acted like a shadow of a system." Marcus stood, tall. The overhead light rayed down his back like a halo of the storyteller, though there were no dragons, no princesses in his tale. Only the pain of default assumptions people are too used to feeling. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the cabin, voice hard as the sliding of an interrogator's door. "You have just witnessed policy-shaped racism. Not hooded cross burnings or white sheets, but polite smiles, scrutinizing glances, procedures called protocol." Jessica broke, sobbing fully now, no more containment. She understood this was no longer about keeping a job. It was a blow to everything she had been taught, everything she had accepted as harmless. Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his eyes changing like water disturbed by a stone. "Miss Martinez, do you know who just messaged?" Jessica shook her head like a child failing a test. "The law office of Gloria Allred. They want to file a class action suit representing every black passenger who has been discriminated against by Southwest in the past 5 years." The cabin's air seemed to drain. Internal company numbers show 2,300 incidents. On average, $400,000 per claim. A passenger whispered, calculating, then exhaled. "Almost $1 billion. Marcus nodded. "Exactly. Ms. Martinez, your 30 minutes of bias just exposed the airline to the largest discrimination lawsuit in the history of commercial aviation. A record no one wants." Morrison trembled, as though awakened from sleepwalking. "Sir, what can we do? How do we make this right?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. He sat, light cutting across his cheek like a razor. "The answer," he said, "is choice." Outside the window, Phoenix lights flickered like eyes observing. Media, justice, public opinion. No one would sleep tonight. Take the easy path. Admit, apologize publicly, become ambassadors of change. Or take the hard path. Court everything lost, debt lifelong. The plane shuddered as engines throttled for descent. 30 minutes to landing, Morrison murmured, habit. "No," Marcus said, eyes still mirror quiet. 30 minutes to define your lives. The plane touched down on the runway in Phoenix with a jarring thud. No smooth arrival, no perfect landing, but as though someone had carved a line across the silent fabric of 147 lives. From her window, Jessica saw what she had seen only on TV. Dozens of news vans, headlights blazing like midnight suns, a wall of people waiting, not to welcome, but to judge. She no longer cried. The tears had run dry. Only a painful echo lingered at the corners of her eyes. The cabin felt dense, as though oxygen was bleeding out. Each breath weighed of responsibility, collapse, and something unnamed yet real. Marcus stood, mission done. Not rushing, not lingering, each movement programmed long before, precise to heartbreak. He stepped toward the cabin doorway, but did not open it. He turned back, hand on the back of the next empty seat, that seat where Jessica should have still been. "I did not board this flight by chance," Marcus said, voice quiet but carrying far in the stillness. "I prepared for this moment not because I wanted to see you fall, but to see if you could rise after the fall." A long silence followed. Only the hum of air conditioning and the faint glow of cabin lights reflected in the eyes of those waiting for a verdict or a miracle. Jessica moved forward. No longer an airline crew, but human learning to walk again in a world that demands truth. She stopped before Marcus, her face no longer a serving mask, but a mother's face, a woman who realized that what she thought was normal was taught injustice. "Do you believe someone like me can make it right?" she asked, eyes red. hands gripping the armrest as though letting go would shatter her. Marcus did not answer right away. He looked out, where flashes flickered like storm lightning in the digital age, then back into her eyes as though seeking what was left of her soul. "I don't care if you make it right for me," he said. "I care that your daughter grows up thinking silence is normal, that prejudice is invisible." A slight nod, like forgiveness not given with words but with opportunity. Behind Marcus, Morrison stood still, like a statue forgotten, face reflected in the glow of Marcus's tablet. He stepped forward. No longer captain, just a father, someone who once thought he was fair because he followed the procedure. "I have a biracial son," Morrison blurted, as though confessing from the dock. "I never thought he could be treated like this because of someone like me. I'm sorry." Marcus simply watched. Long. Then he gently turned his tablet so Morrison could see what was on it. On the screen was the title, Morrison Martinez Training Program, Behavior Bias Consequences. "You two will tell this story hundreds of times to thousands of others, not for forgiveness, but so they do not repeat it." Jessica fell silent. Morrison nodded, lightly, as though nodding to his son in memory. For the first time in many years, he understood what it meant to fly without wings and still feel lighter. When you let go of prejudice you've carried all your life. 3 months later, one autumn night, Marcus sat in his office in Phoenix, soft yellow lights casting moonlight on the wooden desk. A screen opened to a simple email. "I'm Sarah Thompson, 34, white, from Ohio. Last week I saw a Latinx family treated unfairly on a flight. This time I did not stay quiet. I heard your story. I filmed, I spoke up. They kept their seats. Thank you." Marcus smiled. He forwarded the email to Emma, now director of Southwest's Documenting Dignity project. "Every day they get dozens like this." Another message appeared. From Jessica. "Tomorrow I'm at my 200th airport presentation. 500 new employees. Still nervous each time I stand before them. But the look in their eyes when they understand? It's worth everything." Another message. From Morrison. "My son wants to come with me to my next training. He said he is proud that his father has learned to become better and no longer the prejudiced man of the past." Marcus leaned back in his chair. He wasn't wet-eyed, but something quiet fell from him. Not the prevention of $2.3 billion in lawsuits or the 89% drop in discrimination complaints was the real victory. It was a white woman daring to speak. It was a biracial child feeling pride instead of shame, and thousands of passengers flying under a sky. More just. We believe storytelling changes culture. If you do too, click that subscribe button and join us on the next one.